You're watching Fired Up, and here's what we've got coming up.
Any magazine that holds over 15 rounds, a tremendous amount of guns are going to be totally worthless or outlawed.
I don't know what anybody did, but I got the impression that everybody was going to just pretty much ignore it and hide those magazines away and hope the law gets overturned.
This isn't about justice. This is about political agendas.
It's the Czechoslovakian-made Scorpion.
Our panelists include Emily Miller, Marketing Director from the Gun Store in Las Vegas, Michael Giles, retired police officer and defense attorney from Creed and Giles, Tony D., retired police officer and firearms instructor from the Gun Store, Lieutenant Randy Sutton, retired policeman and author, and your host, Bob Irwin from the Gun Store.
Thanks for tuning in and welcome to Fired Up. I'm Bob Irwin, your host for this show, being broadcast from the Gun Store in Las Vegas. We're going to talk about guns and politics and self-defense as we usually do. And our stories are going to include the election in Colorado, where gun rights got a tremendous victory, some California schools that are taking their own forward motion, really, to prevent terrorist attacks. And lastly, the United Nations jumping in now on the Zimmerman case, of all things. As most everybody that would watch this is aware, several states have tried to enact some serious anti-gun laws recently that restrict citizens' right to keep and bear arms and use firearms. And basically what happened last week was the citizens of Colorado struck back a good blow for the Second Amendment, having a recall election and eliminating two state senators, one was whom was the president of their state senate, who had pushed through these drastic gun laws. Tony, I know you were up on this because Colorado now has a ban on any magazines that are over 15 shots and so on.
That's it, 15 rounds. Not going to have it, you know, and excluding tubular fed 22, so apparently they're not dangerous enough for it. But any magazine that holds over 15 rounds. Now, that's going to eliminate a tremendous amount of magazines for guns. I mean, tremendous amount of guns are going to be totally worthless or outlawed with magazines. And, you know, even the ones that hold exactly 15 rounds, you know, where do you draw the line? It's crazy. If 16 is okay, 15 is not, 17 is okay. You know, it's just, it's going to be nuts. It's going to be crazy. And they made no provisions at all for modifications or anything else. That's it. They're done. They're confiscated. They're turned in. They're, you know, no reimbursement, nothing.
The sheriff is supposed to pick them up when he sees them? Or?
I don't know who's going to come knocking on somebody's door.
Like recycling day?
Yeah,
just like leave them up front,
it's
come by and take them?
Separate
them in the bins?
I would hate to be on the list if they had a list of firearms owners and all of a sudden, you know, knock, 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 do you want a Glock 17? Give me your magazines. You know, that's
Is Glock going to make a Model 15? Just
like Colorado. Transit police.
Yeah, transit police
Transit
magazines.
Police, yeah.
They put out public notices saying you have time to turn these in before the law goes into effect. I spoke to a few people in Colorado at the time, and a lot of them asked me crazy questions like, well, can they actually do that? And I said, well, they passed the law, and you can find out if you go to court if they can actually do that. You can turn your magazines in, or you can sell them out of state before this happens and make some money off of them. I don't know what anybody did, but I got the impression that everybody was going to just pretty much ignore it and hide those magazines away and hope the law gets overturned. You know, we did have some good movement on that because the recall election happened this week.
Right.
And the Senate president and Angela Guerin, who was a rabidly liberal politician, both got recalled in Colorado, which is wonderful.
Yes.
Unfortunately, and I get this question a lot, I'm sure you've heard it, it didn't change the law.
No.
Just recalling these two politicians does not change the law in Colorado. Right. It will remain the same until the politicians get together and rewrite the law to take these bad things out. It does send a signal to other anti-gun politicians. I believe it will do that, kind of like the politicians who paid a price after the 1994 assault weapons ban. Yeah. One of the reasons it was allowed to expire was because no one had the political stomach to go through a turnover in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House again.
But they're still going to have the right rewrite the legislation.
They have to rewrite it because
and, that's going to take time. So what's going to happen in the interim?
Well, in the interim, you're going to have people who are criminals by the virtue of having one of these magazines stuck in a bag someplace. Maybe they know, maybe they don't.
But remember this.
We'll have the sheriff go pick up the magazines?
In Colorado, there has been almost an upheaval and a revolt from the sheriffs the elected sheriffs in Colorado
Right, they weren't gonna...
who do not support these laws and believe them to be not only draconian but unconstitutional. So you now have this divisive thing taking place between the legislative branch and the law enforcement branch, and if you enact unjust laws, can you really expect the police to enforce them?
So the people who put the law into effect are now out of office, and the cops are still not even really enforcing it.
Only
not
two
all
of them
of
are
them,
out.
like-
Only two of them. The
Just a few.
Democrats still own the House and they
Okay.
own the Senate and they have control. The voters are going to have to turn out some more people or get the people who are there to realize that was a bad idea. Governor Hickenlooper has to be given the same message. 55 of the state's sheriffs, elected sheriffs, have joined a lawsuit. There may be injunctive relief. The courts can step in and say this is an overreach of the Constitution and stop the law. But as of right now, that has not happened.
I can pretty much guarantee you that there will be no enforcement of this law until the dust settles and there is some actual buy-in at the proper point.
I will agree with you to the extent that there won't be a lot of enforcement of this law in the rural counties. But Denver, Aspen, Boulder, Colorado Springs, I think that those large areas are going to have enforcement because those are the sheriffs, and a lot of the local law enforcement are going to enforce it because they're going to have marching orders to enforce it.
And I just heard in New York also that Governor Cuomo is saying that telling the state police, well, you can't, or the sheriffs also, you can't enforce some of the laws. You have to enforce all of the laws. Otherwise, it would be chaos.
Well, that's a given, but in this case, if all these sheriffs have banded together, I mean, how do you make them enforce? They're going to stop people walking down the street that are carrying a gun and say, let me look at your magazine?
Right.
Is there probable cause for that? I mean, we've got all kinds of things that already tell the police you can't just interfere with people.
There are
just having
several
a gun
guns
probable
also
cause?
that the minimum, I mean, they don't carry anything less than 15 rounds or more than 15 rounds. So, I mean, what are you going to do with those guns? The guns will be totally worthless because the manufacturers don't make a smaller capacity magazine for that firearm. So now what?
That's going to get very complicated. You viewers will remember that this is the state where Magpul was located, and they made a bazaar out of giving away 30-shot magazines for AR-15s the day before this was to be voted on, and gave away and sold magazines for $7 for 10 or whatever.
What about the brackets that connect the magazines that hold them together?
Well, that's a question that has come up in California, and they've decided it's okay. If you have 2 7-shot magazines or 2 8-shot magazines, you weld them together, get a clip to hold them together, so you have to turn it over to make it fire more rounds. California has held that those are legal still under their system, where they only allow 10-shot magazines.
Yeah.
But whether Colorado will,
I would
there's a lot of stuff that falls into the gray area of this.
There's lots of gray area there, but from a legal construction standpoint of their law, as I read it, they would have a hard time making the leap that the clip that puts 2 magazines together violates their statute because it says the magazine itself must hold more than, and it's singular. It doesn't have a provision in there for or tying 2 magazines together or. Somebody may try to make a case out of it, but I think without amending their law, those are probably still going to be okay.
Kind of like the feds say you own an AR-15 and you own an auto-sear, it's not really a machine gun. Well, it is.
Put them
That's the problem
together,
if you
and
have the
it
parts.
is, it isn't. So
Now, they've held if you have the parts to make it unlawful,
Right.
it is in itself unlawful.
Well, and
Clip on lower for an HK and you drill the hole.
That's right.
That 1/4-inch hole that holds that front pin has been declared a machine gun. The hole. That 1/4-inch
the
of
hole
airspace.
where nothing is?
Yeah.
Is a
1/4-inch of airspace is a machine gun.
it's a real challenge, and ultimately it's going to wind up in the courts. The way it's going to get into the courts is either one of the big city sheriffs is going to go out, get the list of people who have purchased firearms, because they all have to be registered now, and go out and do a site inspection or start going to the gun ranges and say, hey, that magazine looks a little longer than 15 rounds, and count them. But more than likely it's going to be the same exact way the first person got arrested in New York for the violation. They're going to be driving down the road, they're going to get stopped for traffic, and the cop's going to say, hey, is that a rifle behind your seat? Well, yeah. And he's going to look, and it's going to have 16 or 30 rounds in an AR magazine, or a Glock mag with 17 rounds, and now he's going to be in a pickle.
And unfortunately,
what did he do?
this isn't about justice. This is not about reality. This is about political agendas.
Exactly.
And when unjust laws are passed by political entities, and the police are required to enforce them, what you do is you force this moral conundrum between the enforcement people and the legislative people, and this in and of itself creates a separation between the people that the police serve and the police, and this is really it's a dangerous situation, far more than physically, but morally and
the police
legally.
become the enemy instead of
Exactly.
the friendly officer. This is a story we're going to continue on with, obviously. I'm sure every couple of weeks we're going to have something to add to this, because this is an ever-changing target here in Colorado. We're going to break for some commercials. We'll be right back.
You know, we're taking the innocence of these children because we are teaching them about the realities of what is going on at such an early age.
I think that's what is upsetting me, is that it's bringing a chair to a gunfight.
And welcome back to Fired Up. Some schools in Southern California particularly have started programs on their own really, to defend themselves against potential mass shootings, terrorist attacks, where the government has vacillated back and forth on this and that, and they're going to supply guards or this or not. Some of the schools in California have taken to training now their students in fighting back, in if the school is attacked, in first, if you can, run away, second, if you can't run away, hide, and now there's a third option, which is basically pick up a chair and hit the guy with it, so you can fight with him and keep yourself and students safe. Capistrano School District is one of those that's written a whole lesson plan on it, and they're actually encouraging the children, junior high school, and even older grade school, to not lay down and die if this happens. I think that's just an absolute great idea, and there's some legal issues, some police issues, and we'll start off with Randy.
I tell you, this is actually, to me, a very, very encouraging sign. It's shocking that it's coming from Southern California, but here it is. Kids will respond the way they have been trained, just like adults. You know, when you train people, it's muscle memory. It's about, okay, this is where my brain kicks in, and I do this. If you train people to lay down and die, they will. If you train people that life is important, that anything that you do to fight for that life is sacrosanct, then I think that this is a very, very healthy thing. You know, back in the if we go back into history, remember how we were trained during the Soviet era to be afraid of the bomb, and you see historical films all the time about kids jumping under desks and hiding here. And
some
doing
of us
that.
lived that.
Some of us lived that. I understand that. But think of this. Think of a generation of kids who are taught to fight back, who are taught not to lay down, who are taught that if you're threatened, that you have a right to defend yourself. You know, I see this as something really positive in a world that's gone crazy in a lot of different ways. And I applaud this school district for doing that.
I think since 9/11, you never heard of people reacting on airplanes, anything. Now, now they're
Say the wrong thing on an airplane, and you're getting
you're
taken
gonna get
out.
your butt kicked. It's great, But you've seen a big turnaround now. From just lay down and hide or whatever. And it's great. I agree.
I agree that they should fight back. I guess that it's great that they don't just, not the shelter-in-place drills where you just hide under your desk. However, I don't feel like the first line of defense should be a 14-year-old kid throwing a chair at a guy that has a gun. There is the age-old argument, and I understand where everybody on this panel sits on this, but of having the teachers that do want to carry concealed, having the right to do that, because if the teacher is armed, if they're trained and it's secured,
well,
and all that,
that's what they're doing.
That's a better line of defense than 30 kids throwing like erasers.
Well, it is, but why not
Absolutely,
both?
but the simple answer is, the school districts are assuming some liability. Now, I know that their attorneys are probably telling them, well, we're a governmental agency. We have qualified immunity on these issues. But if they don't do something and an active shooter takes place or some other tragedy takes place and a bunch of kids are hurt or killed, and a parent can point and say, you had an option. You could have taught this, you could have done that, you could have armed the teachers. A lot of these schools are now giving the teachers ballistic whiteboards that are about 36 inches square, and they're supposed to walk around the room with a little strap writing on the whiteboard. It's a piece of ballistic material that they can hide
We used to have
behind.
the ballistic clipboards
Exactly.
in the car.
patrol car.
That's
Right.
clearly some administrator that doesn't have a clue about reality
Right.
that has now made an edict about that kind of thing.
And that happens, but that's their way of saying we're doing something. I like this. When I grew up, I lived in a small town in Kansas, not far from an air base, and we still did the air drills. We also had tornadoes, which is something a lot of people in the country have never experienced. I remember as a small child being taught how to deal with tornadoes. We get under a structure, hide in a culvert, do something, because what they didn't want was a bunch of kids walking home going, wow, there's a storm, and freezing, right? Because doing something was better than nothing. There are a couple of shootings that have happened over the last 20 years, at least one that happened in the South, where the shooter stopped to reload and two of the football players on the team were hunters, and they're like, he's empty, and they beat the crap out of him and stopped the shooting. Now, the reason they could do that is they were shooters, they were bigger. There's no reason we can't teach the kids that if the guy's coming down the hallway, and we can't do something safe, why don't you crawl out the window and run away instead of hiding under a desk? And if you can't do that, throw a chair.
Well, it's like in Arkansas, they're doing that, and it's volunteers.
Right.
It's not, they're not requiring each and every teacher to do it. It's a volunteer program. And they're getting like 50 hours of training in Arkansas. I've seen some of the tapes, the videotapes. The kids are swarming the bad guy. And they do have some tactics and techniques that they're implementing.
Right, they're actually running active shooter programs
Right.
with the teachers and working that in. And the Attorney General in Arkansas started to try to put a stop to it. And the parents raised such a ruckus.
Arkansas,
so we're
man.
going to go back and let our kids just lay down and get shot?
But I can't help but feel a certain sadness that we have come to this. I can't help but feel like we're taking the innocence of these children because we are teaching them about the realities of what is going on at such an early age. And
how have we failed them to not stop it before it comes through that door, that now they are the line of defense? I think that's what is upsetting me, is that it's bringing a chair to a gunfight.
It's not that
they've already gotten to
we're
that
saying
point.
they're the first line of defense, because they're not.
Well,
we have a first line of defense. The problem is you can't be everywhere. Law enforcement cannot be everywhere. We can't put the military at every school. And right now what we have is a psychological dilemma. We've taught for years, de-escalate,
lay down
verbal,
and take
it, hide under the desk, don't make any noise so he'll go by or whatever. After Columbine, after a couple of shootings like that, law enforcement developed new responses to active shooters. Instead of waiting for the right units to get there, small units would come together, they'd number off, even if they were from different departments, and they'd go in. One of the arguments administrators are making against this kind of training is, well, if we tell the kids to just run away, we'll lose the kids. I would much rather have my children run home and I'll figure out
Yeah.
that they got home
Yeah, exactly.
than these poor parents who stood
Then
outside
have all the bodies
Sandy
accounted
Hook
for.
school going, where are my children?
But Randy, I have to disagree with you on the kids getting traumatized. One, this could be presented to the smaller kids as a game.
No.
And-
You misunderstand me, Bob. I'm not talking about traumatizing the children. What I'm talking about is a bigger picture. I'm talking about how our society has changed to the point because of the realities of where our lives are now and the realities of the threats that now are so pervasive. I'm
mentally challenged or-
honestly not talking about how, how we are. It's damaging to the innocence of the children because of governmental interference. What I'm talking about is a bigger picture. Is that life has changed so greatly that the threats have become so much more apparent and they're so much more deadly.
There are crazy
just
people
because
with
of the
guns that want to
times-
kill little kids.
Because of the times that we live in, and that's what my point is. It's not that I'm saying that that the government is doing anything
No,
wrong.
and
I'm
we
a
do
true believer
train
in
them,
this.
stay away from child molesters and so forth and so on, and they ask, well, what is that? And you have to make a story about it so they don't have nightmares. But I understand what you're saying. We live in violent times, and they're back. I mean, we've lived in violent times. We're living in a little country in Europe, and here comes
the world
the
is not a
Huns or
wonderful
the
place, and bad things actually do happen.
And I think it's important to note that the places that are doing this and where they're talking about it, we're not talking about 6-year-olds, right? They're starting in the high schools and the junior highs with
Right.
kids who are pretty big. I played football with some kids that I wouldn't want to come across the room with a chair after me. And so if one of them was to stand up and defend the classroom, everybody would clap. So there's
listen,
a right time and a
I am
place,
a
right?
strong proponent of not being a victim. And it comes down. I mean, let's even look at something that's gone on throughout history. And that's bullies. When you don't stand up to a bully, what happens? You become a victim. And the greatest way that we can fight against bullies is to fight back. So I guess it goes further than that, and it goes into, who are the bullies now? It's those people that are willing to want to get their 15 minutes of fame by destroying lives and destroying people.
We're going to have to leave this one right there. Sorry about that. These are all long conversations that we're looking to have. We'll follow up on that one too. We'll be right back.
They may not have a toehold, but that doesn't mean that because of political agendas, what we have seen as far as governmental vendettas, it doesn't mean that they won't do it.
Randy wanted to say a few words to the audience.
Yes, I did. While during the weeks that we've been doing the show, much of what we have talked about has been about the government, about laws. And as a writer, sometimes it's better for me to sit down and actually put my thoughts on paper. And so I've done that, and I would like to give my thoughts about that. It's about trust. And trust is the cornerstone of any healthy relationship, be it friendship or business or love. Trust is something that must be given freely, yet taken with great thoughtfulness and care, for there can be no greater honor than to be given the trust of another, and no greater dishonor than to betray it. Every 4 years, the citizens of this great nation bestow their trust when they elect the President of the United States. And every few years, their choices for Congress and Senate. That trust should be held sacred. As each and every aspect of our lives are touched by the decisions of these few men and women, that trust should be sacred. The people of the United States of America have a right to expect that our elected government officials will act not selfishly, nor for motives of either power or politics, but for the good of our nation. When trust is betrayed, when it becomes eroded by word or deed, the very fabric of our lives and our beliefs feel as if they were torn away, and we are left to shiver in a cold sea of loss, uncertainty, and fear. When trust diminishes or is violated, it is almost never regained, and the relationship that held it so dear is irreparably damaged. I have never considered myself to be of any political affiliation, any political party, or even susceptible to the dogma of any organization that relies on groupthink for its survival. I make decisions based on observation, thought, logic, and experience. And I am, for the first time in my life, frightened for the future of our nation. Since the election of Barack Obama, I have watched as elected officials, presidential appointees, and government leaders have incessantly lied to you, to me, and to the American people. I have stood by helplessly as law upon law, regulation upon regulation, and rule upon rule have been created, enacted, and forced upon us, not for the good of the people, but to satisfy the power and the ambitions of the few. Never before have I seen arrogance and elitism displayed on such a sickening scale by men and women who are supposed to honor and defend the liberties of the people. And the lack of accountability that is the foundation of a healthy government is nothing short of astounding. America has proven to be the longest enduring democracy in modern history. That is a testament to our founding fathers and the succession of men and women who've taken part in building and defending not only our country, but its Constitution during the more than 200 years that we have existed. For us to continue to endure, I urge you to become involved. Take part in government, run for elected office, or support those that you believe will serve others honestly and selflessly. Educate yourselves and your families, academically and socially, and most importantly, make your voices heard. The spirit of the American people has been tested time and time again by war, by depression, and by terror. But we have risen to the occasion, and we've overcome the challenges placed before us, and I believe that together we will again.
Hi, I'm Tony D with the Gun Store here in Las Vegas. Thanks for watching Fired Up with Bob. Tonight we're going to be talking about a very special little gun. It's the Czechoslovakian-made Scorpion. The official designation is the VZ-61. This was one of the first what they call personal defense weapons ever developed. It's a small, compact submachine gun. They call it a submachine pistol, and it opens up with a folding stock, and it could be fired with the stock or just as a pistol. It was adopted for the Czechoslovakian Special Forces, and it went into their military, their army guys. Also, it was used by their security forces, and it was also used by a lot of people who couldn't carry a rifle conveniently. A lot of artillerymen, a lot of officers, a lot of clerks. It's a very, very compact little gun. It shoots very, very quickly. It fires from a closed bolt. In other words, the round is chambered like a standard gun, and it is hammer fired. However, there is a rate reducer built into the pistol grip inside. With a gun being this small, the rate of fire in full automatic would be tremendous. It would be over 1,000 rounds a minute. They built this rate reducer in here to slow it down. Right? So this gun will fire still pretty quickly, about 850 rounds a minute, but it is much more controllable with the rate reducer in it. The controls on this side here are single shot, safety, and 20-shot automatic, full auto. Magazine releases here, and as I said, there's the cocking levers there. It's a very, very little fun gun to shoot, and it was used in a lot of the video games. Call of Duty comes to mind. It's very, very popular in that one there. It was used in a lot of movies. Used in the Matrix, Ronin, Blade 2, several movies. It was also taught as more of a terrorist weapon also because it was small and compact, and a lot of the evil people had it. I know it was on NCIS, on television also. So it's a very popular little gun. We're one of the few places around that has one, and they're a lot of fun to shoot. All right, we're going to load it, going to insert the magazine. All right, chamber around, and we're ready to go. As you can see, 20 rounds doesn't last too long with it. It's a very, very fun gun to shoot. It's very controllable, and for a real personal defense weapon, it sure does the job.
I'm Mike Rogers. Welcome to this segment of Moron of the Week. Enjoy.
La mea volar, hermano, no sé cómo se pone esta agua. La mea fase, concha tu madre. Más nerviosa en esta wea. Pistola culia. La mea, concha tu madre. Concha la lara. La mea pula. Esta agua, cuántas falas culias tiene. Concha tu madre. Esta agua como el cheto madre se pone, hermano. A ver, vamos a ver. Está cargada de esta huevo. ¿Qué pasa si tiro para arriba? Pero no me da cualquier miedo, aparte que entro a la casa ni cagando. Yo la dejé cargada esta agua. Concha tu madre. Esta guá. Ándate a la misma, concha tu madre. Salió el olor a quemado, culiao. ¿Y a dónde dejé esa bala, concha tu madre? Hermano, la tiré, concha tu madre. ¿Dónde dejé la bala? Culiao, lo tiré, el balazo, culiao, lo duro. Concha.
A 12-year-old with his own handgun. Life is good. I wonder where he learned those gun handling traits from. Probably his dad. Perhaps it would have been a better idea if that gun had been locked up and he wasn't left home alone with it.
Possession of a firearm or magazine marked for law enforcement use only illegal. Is possession of a firearm or magazine marked for law enforcement use only illegal? Well, it depends. In 1994, Congress passed a comprehensive crime control bill, commonly referred to as the assault weapons ban. While the authors of that bill intended for it to be permanent, in order to get enough votes to pass the legislation, they had to put in a 10-year sunset provision. In large part because of that law, many legislators lost their jobs in the next election, resulting in a wholesale turnover of Congress. So in 2004, when it was time to renew the law, there simply wasn't any political will and it was allowed to expire. During that 10-year period, when civilians were not allowed to possess assault weapons or high-capacity magazines, in order to verify which ones were made after the law was passed, they were routinely stamped with the words, "for law enforcement use only," because law enforcement and state jurisdictions were not restricted by the law. However, with the expiration of the law, civilians could again own those firearms, and so the markings for law enforcement use only also have no meaning on a federal sense. However, if you live in a jurisdiction with a local ordinance that restricts possession of a firearm or magazine marked in that way, you should consult with a local attorney in your jurisdiction to determine if it does in fact affect you. However, as a federal matter, the markings simply are a novelty and perhaps a collector's item. Always consult with an attorney for your jurisdiction, however, to be sure.
If I unload that way, I can ascertain that both the magazine is empty and there's nothing in the chamber. Hi, this is Mike at the gun store. It's that time of year again. Time to go hunting. Special time of year, you're going to invest a lot of money, a lot of your most important time. You want to make sure you get it done. You want to be ready. Safety is a big part of being ready. Taking good care of your quarry, the animals that you harvest is a big thing, and taking care of your fellow hunters. Be polite, respect boundaries, private property, know where there are. With the GPS these days and some of the hunting map programs, there's no excuse for trespassing, whether it's with a vehicle or on foot. Don't let it happen to you. It's also the best way to not miss a good shot. We're also going to talk about safety today. Firearm safety is a huge thing. Hunters get shot every year. It makes us look bad. A couple of things you might want to think about. The old 4 rules of firearm safety still stands. Same thing. Treat every firearm as if it's loaded. Keep it pointed in a safe direction. When you're moving around, safe direction is things that has different meaning to different people. I see people slinging a rifle quite frequently, and as they do so, they point it at other people. You wouldn't want to do that with a loaded gun. It happens all the time. Know how the safeties work on your firearm. Tremendous variety of different things. Different people have different ways of approaching the problem. If I'm hunting in real thick ground and heavy wooded area, black timber, I might carry around in the chamber, my hand's ready to go. All I have to do is cock the gun, remove the safety, and I'm ready to fire. Different guns have different systems. A lot of people prefer not to carry around in the chamber. They'll have a magazine in the gun, it'll be loaded, but nothing has been put into the chamber yet. That has to be done at the moment when you're ready to go. If that's how you're going to do it, make sure you're real aware of how the system works, be able to do that cleanly. After doing so, you have to understand how to operate the safety. Fleeting moment to take a shot, the safety has to come off as soon as you have your sights on the target. Be able to put it back on afterwards. Safety is huge. Understand the gun system. One of the best systems ever is the 3-position safety. With this one, the gun's in safe, it will not fire. If I move it to the 2nd position, I can open the bolt and unload the gun. Make sure the gun is empty. In this position, the gun won't fire. All the way forward, and now the gun's ready to fire. That's your classic 3-position safety. It's one of the best around. This one also has the 3-position safety, but it's on the stock of the gun. Know your safety, know how the gun works, know how to load it and unload it. Different guns have different operating systems. We're going to be using dummy rounds today. These are made by A-Zoom. They're manufactured to have the size and weight of a bullet, even the rim thing. If I'm unloading this gun, there's more than one way to do it. Lots of people would prefer to unload it by working the lever. If I do that, I can look in there and see an empty chamber. If there was another round in the magazine, it would now be back in the barrel and it'd be ready to go. If I unload that way, I can ascertain that both the magazine is empty and there's nothing in the chamber. If I couldn't see and put my finger in there, I'd use a light to obtain that. Do that with whatever gun you're handling. Know how the system works and be able to operate it. On this one, you can drop the ammunition out of the bottom, know how that works, and then clear it after that's out. Extract that round in there, put your finger in there, and make sure that it's clear. Well, these little things make a big difference. Safety is absolutely essential. Be conscious of everyone that's around you.
The state of Florida has no way to bring charges against George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. However, the federal government is a separate jurisdiction, and if they can find a toehold to bring charges, they could do so.
Hey, we are back here on Fired Up, our last segment in this morning's show. We are going to talk again, unfortunately for some viewers, about the George Zimmerman case. It has come up that despite Mr. Zimmerman being acquitted by a jury of his peers in Florida, and the Justice Department, as we all know, is now looking for some reason to prosecute him again under federal charges, we have the United Nations has jumped in and sent a letter into the administration, the White House, I presume, complaining about there's no action taking place to fix this problem we have apparently.
Hold on a second. Is this the same United Nations that allowed hundreds of thousands of Rwandans to die in tribal violence because they didn't have the guts to stand up and
Yes,
do
sir.
the right thing? Is this the same UN?
That would be
Okay,
them.
I just wanted to get that clear in my mind.
Michael, I'm gonna get the legal stuff out of the way here first. The letter said what it said, and that, you know, can they do this?
Well, hold
can-
on. Let me read what it said.
He's so mad.
We call upon the United States government to examine its laws that could have such discriminatory impact on African Americans and to ensure that such laws are in full compliance with the country's international legal obligations and relevant standards.
Here's the simple answer. The United States is a member of the United Nations, a international body that started with halfway good intentions and has really just kind of morphed, as a famous talk show host says, into the bar scene from Star Wars. And it's a bunch of people sitting around coming up with crazy stuff, and sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't. In this case, we do have international treaties. We are signatory to a lot of international treaties, and some of those treaties have language in them that require us to comply with certain standards of equality and treating people from other countries, immigration standards, in a specific way. I really don't think that there's a basis for anybody at the UN to say George Zimmerman should be charged under any United Nations treaty that we belong to. This is really just political posturing on the part of a few individuals. I
few
suspect
individuals.
it's going to start with
Okay.
Jesse Jackson.
Yeah,
and move
all
from
right.
there.
Well, you know, I know Randy got a little bit upset with Eric Holder a few shows ago. Jesse Jackson, a private citizen, a race baiter. This guy here has absolutely no business at all petitioning the United States. Who the hell is Jesse Jackson to petition the United Nations to investigate a citizen of the United States?
He is an irrelevant human being that has to posture and has to create headlines in order to make himself relevant. That's who he is.
I mean, it absolutely infuriates me when I see someone like him bring it to a world body. I mean, as goofy as it may be in a Star Wars thing, but a world body, and they're going to listen to him.
Yeah, remember, this is the same world body that has condemned the state of Israel how many hundreds of times while allowing its Muslim terrorist neighbors impunity to attack them.
Where were they when Idi Amin was executing people by the tens of thousands? You know,
Are they just going to carry this up and up until something sticks?
we're
Because
gonna
it's
haul Zimmerman before the world court.
double,
right?
triple, quadruple jeopardy. I mean, I get it. He's already been tried by a jury, the Justice Department, and now
from a realistic standpoint, if they had some basis, and again, I really don't think they do. I'm not a UN legal scholar. I would have to spend the rest of
There's
my
no
life
such thing.
reading their laws to figure it out, and they would change them before I got them read. Wouldn't matter. Double jeopardy only happens when a jurisdiction charges an individual twice. The state of Florida has no way to bring charges against George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. They possibly could bring some different charges. They're not going to, because it would be stupid. However, the federal government is a separate jurisdiction, and if they can find a toehold to bring charges, they could do so. The only two standards they would have is if they could try to somehow shoehorn this into what we refer to as 1983, which is generally reserved for law enforcement and governmental agents who act outside the scope of their authority. Or
1983, yeah,
Yeah.
but he's not obviously not a police officer.
he's
He's
not
not
a
a
police
government
officer.
agent. You know,
and they actually tried to do that by saying, well,
he's a watchman.
A watchman,
Therefore,
that
he's
makes
a
him.
government agent. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the
that's
only other
kind
way,
of a reach.
the only other way would be under the Civil Rights Amendment, and to say that he did this specifically and only because Trayvon Martin was of African American descent and he did it out of racial hatred. They've got a problem there because they started off by having the FBI investigate him, and their report clearly says there was no racial animus involved. So I don't even think the feds have a toehold here.
But here's the scary part. They may not have a toehold, but that doesn't mean that because of political agendas and the what we have seen as far as governmental vendettas, it doesn't mean that they won't do it. And that, to me, is the most frightening thing.
That is, and these are the same guys that have the small arms treaty that Mr. Obama says he's going to sign within a week or two of the time we're taping this show. It won't pass the Senate, obviously, for ratification, we're told. But that's the same group that now, at Jesse Jackson's request, want to investigate Zimmerman and why he wasn't stoned or something. I don't know what.
Wait a minute, is this the same Jesse Jackson?
Who's his buddy there, Al Sharpton? Yeah.
Well, I think this is the same Jesse Jackson who recently, at the sentencing of his son for stealing from the government, even though he was an elected official, instead of blaming it on his son, blamed it on some bipolar kind of disease. Is this the same Jesse Jackson?
Same guy.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Maybe why Zimmerman did this. He has some bipolar disease.
Oh, the poor guy. He's getting divorced now and everything. He's going through more. I mean, just pile it on some more. This poor guy.
This is a good example of why we have to be cautious about what we enter into. I think the small arms is a good example. We sign on to a lot of UN resolutions and tie ourselves to international law when it's directly against U.S. law.
Well, you said it very, very well before. The United Nations started off as an altruistic idea that truly, if it actually worked, it's the way it should be. If the concept of the United Nations really, truly was held by the people that are there, we would have a much better world. But unfortunately, we have humans involved, and they have perverted it to their own political benefits.
Absolutely true.
On the same scale, it's the U.S. central government messing with state laws that they should stay away from, which we run into in the gun world all the time. It's the bigger entity deciding they know what's best for us little unwashed heathens, and they're going to take care of it for us. And that's where we're stuck here with the UN. That's why I'm really worried about this small arms treaty, which simply, when we sign it, says, well, you should do this, you should inventory all the guns in your country so we know who has them, and we can tell if they've been exported unlawfully and so forth. Right.
The scary thing about
our citizens are going to export their 38 snub nose to Rwanda, and we're all going to suffer from terrorist attack.
The scary thing about a treaty like that is that while it won't pass the Senate or the House or the Senate right now, who knows what will happen in 10 years, and so long as it's signed by the president, it remains alive. It can be adopted at any future date. And so we, kind of like this thing with George Zimmerman, we keep beating on this George Zimmerman case, but it's so important, especially in self-defense and what we're talking about, because this is the kind of thing that will dog George Zimmerman the rest of his life.
His life is over. I mean, just...
He can't do anything.
Well, he's had his own personal issues as well. That he's been in the news because of the accusations
they say
and all of that.
His wife is divorcing him. Do you imagine any marriage surviving this pressure he's been under in the press and the poor guy? I just, I encourage people to shoot in self-defense, and you see cases like this, and just boy.
I don't know about you guys, but when I heard some of the news reports about the latest George Zimmerman, where his wife files for divorce against him, and then after they have an agreement, she goes to the house with her father to get more stuff, and they put him under surveillance, and she saw another woman, and she lost her mind. So let me see if I got it right. She divorces him, sees him with another chick, and loses her mind. and then calls the police and makes up a story.
I think the important thing about
I think I've seen this story before.
what's going on with George Zimmerman is it's important to remember in a normal scope, normal people, no one would ever hear about the problems he's having. It's only because he's George Zimmerman and the media is upset about the way things went and people are upset about the way things went. I think it's important that we, especially on these late-breaking things, reserve judgment until it comes out. I read the same stuff everybody else did, and I thought, this poor guy, I'm glad his attorneys are sticking with him because he's going to need them, and they're going to send their kids to college on his case. That's just the way that's going to be.
That's for sure.
Folks, I thank you for watching Fired Up again. We're out of time, as happens about this time in every show. We'll be back next week, same time. We'll see you then.